Yako, Gary, Chris, Aggie, thank you all for joining us. Tara, thank you too. Um, and I don't want to waste too much time. So maybe, Tara, I can hand over to you and ask you just to give us a quick welcome.
Thanks, Ivor. Welcome to everyone. I'm not sure who else we're waiting for, Ivor.
So
According
we've
to the
had a
meeting
couple of
request that you sent
apologies.
out.
We've had a
Okay,
couple of apologies. So I think let's go on and then we'll just make the recording available to everybody.
that's perfect. I'm happy for you to go ahead.
Good. Well, Tara, do you want to say a couple of words about how we got here?
Not really. I think everyone knows how we
All
really
right.
got here. Started from the Retail Association, but moving forward into the into SARPHA. So I think you can go ahead and continue. It's fine.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you. So, guys, thank you for joining us. We've had apologies from the guys from Universal and Stephen Solinger and Stefan Reinecker from Promac, who also said that they're unfortunately not able to attend. Stefan Reinecker, by the way, is the vice chairperson of SAPMA, who has volunteered to be the SAPMA Manco and Exco coordinator for SAPRA in a steering capacity while we're getting it up and running. So thank you very much for joining me, and to everybody here, thank you for giving me an hour of your time, and I'll hopefully only take up 45 minutes of your time. The agenda really is going to be the following. I want to talk about the relationship between this organization that's now been registered called SARPRA, South African Retail Paint and Hardware Association, and SAPMA, and then the Coatings Confederation, which in fact SAPMA and SARPRA and the Surface Coating Employer Association are all part of. I want to talk about roles, boundaries, and mutual obligations. Then, and I want to do this relatively speedily, then the role of the professional body, the relationship between SARPRA and the Office for the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman. There still seems to be some confusion about that, and I want to address that. The relationship between SARPRA and the National Bargaining Council for the Chemical Industry. And I do want to say this for you, that for those of you who have retail operations, I do want to say you need to be aware of the National Bargaining Council. You need to be aware of the fact that it's about to get an extension which will apply to your retail shops, basically, because they are covered in the constitution of the Surface Coating Employer Association, which in fact was one of the founding members of the National Bargaining Council. So you need to be aware of that and the impact it's going to have on you, and that's why I want to cover it. I will briefly touch on the relationship between SARPRA, BUSA, and NEDLAC, which is where policy regulations get engaged upon between business, between labor and the government. I will briefly go over the SARPRA constitution that we're going to adopt. And then we'll talk about the steering committee, the appointment of an interim chairperson, hopefully, and two vice chair people, but we'll get to that in a little while. We will then have a general section and then just talk about meetings, upcoming meetings planned for June, August, and November. 3 meetings for this year in that regard. So, like I say, if there are any comments around, along the way, you are fully aware of how we operate in these forums. You simply unmute your microphone and have your say. So let's start here. Retail has always been an integral component of the South African Paint Manufacturing Association, but it has never had a retail identity. And Aggie, as a previous chairperson of SAPMA, I think you'll attest to the fact that retail has always been there, but it is very seldom had a voice in SAPMA activities. And what we're finding is that government frequently, the Department of Trade and Industries frequently, and as you know now, the Department of Health equally, are calling upon retail to be accountable collectively for what happens in retail outlets, whether it's got to do with lead in paint, whether it's got to do with hazardous substances, whether it's got to do with compliance requirements in terms of the registration of those retail businesses. Every single time there is a problem with retail, there is no single voice for the retail paint and hardware sector in South Africa. And that's why we registered the South African Retail Paint and Hardware Association as a standalone business association which sits within the Coatings Confederation and is administered by the South African Paint Manufacturing Association. So that is the relationship. And so within the Coatings Confederation, one has a number of services. For example, representation at Business Unity South Africa, and through Business Unity South Africa into the National Economic Development Labour Council, where regulations about your stores are negotiated and settled as law and then promulgated by the president. And we want to make sure that you, Gary, that you are at that table talking on behalf of retail. We're very proud to say that the retail constituency of SAPMA at the moment constitutes the largest constituency, the largest organized constituency of organized paint and retail in South Africa, and therefore has a legitimate right to a voice at BUSA, Business Unity South Africa, where we already sit, and at NEDLAC, the National Economic Development and Labour Council of South Africa, because they don't only negotiate labor law, they negotiate operating law. They negotiate everything to do with trade, industry, and competition, everything to do with the Department of Health, everything to do with the Department of Higher Education and Training is negotiated at NEDLAC. And so we fought very hard to get you guys a seat there. We now need you collectively to agree that it's an important place to be. As far as number 5 is concerned on the agenda, the role of the professional body for the coating sector, that is one of the centralized services of the Coatings Confederation, the professional body, and we are currently in the process of registering the professional body with the South African Qualifications Authority. We already have a number of professional designations. Now, designations are the recognition of people as professional practitioners, not training and development. The recognition of people as professional practitioners. And so we've got the senior executive leadership team. We've got 13 currently, 13 people who are recognized as senior executive leaders. We've got 5 grades of paint mixologists, all the way from entry-level paint mixologist all the way through to master paint mixologist. We've got a professional designation for in-store promoters, professional designation for professional sales and consulting, and a professional designation for the recognition of your branch managers as centers of excellence, as professional practitioners. Now, all of that might sound like fluff, but it becomes very, very important when we establish the credibility of retail paint and hardware, for example, with a consumer commission, with the ombudsman for consumer goods and services, who oversees the implementation of the Consumer Protection Act in South Africa. It's critically important that you understand that professional recognition of the people who work in your stores is absolutely integral to this thing called guarantees and warranties, and therefore absolutely integral to how we actually manage these activities going forward. I'm very pleased to say that we have a pilot group of 13 senior executive leaders in place. We have a pilot group of close to 300 mixologists in 5 different categories in place, and we're growing our professional bands of recognition every single month with a view to finally applying to the South African Qualifications Authority for recognition. We have a draft constitution for that professional body, and I will in fact make that draft constitution available to you so that you can actually see how important that professional body is going to become in the future. The relationship between South African Retail Paint and Hardware and the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman, well, I've spoken about it many times to you individually and also to you collectively, but the reason I keep mentioning it is it's critically important you understand that, and in fact, I spoke to a very prominent company this week about the fact that they've had 5 years that they've had to be registered with the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman. They're not currently registered. They are a multi-million rand company doing close to R1 billion of turnover. They're not registered, which means they run 5 years worth of registration fees plus fines, plus the potential of imprisonment because it has been criminalized not to be registered with the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman. And we've managed to get an amnesty program for our members who come through the amnesty program, where in fact they just have to register and nothing else. They have to register, pay the registration fee, and nothing else. They won't be levied 5 years of back registration and subscription. They won't be fined, and they won't be subject to criminal prosecution. So I know that there are a number of companies at the table today who have taken that up, but I encourage those who don't yet have registration to talk to us. Don't go online and try and register on your own, because there's a 50-50 chance that they will say, hold on a moment, you didn't register 5 years ago. We're going to implement. Come through the amnesty program, because it saves you money essentially. And that's what we're trying to do for our members here. Aggie, yes, sorry, you've got your hand up, sir.
Yeah, just a question on this amnesty thing. Who's going to guide us through that?
We do. We'll take you through it. We'll send you a one-page form we ask you to fill in. We will then submit that form under the amnesty program to the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman. They will ask you for a couple of documents, and Bob's your uncle.
Well, can they do that for us, please?
Sure. If you just send an email through to Tara, we will process it for you. Yeah, that's it. It's that simple, and it really is that simple. Yaka, you might say it's not that simple, given that the vast number of retailers you've brought into the fold has taken a while for the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman to clear for us. And let me say, we've had very stern discussions with the Consumer Goods and Service Ombudsman about, in fact, clearing numbers, large numbers. I hope that they've got the machine together now, but it doesn't really matter.
I wanted to say you can use this as a case study. We don't mind.
Okay.
But it's been a challenge, but the challenge wasn't from the OCGSO. It was from our own members in obtaining the documentation, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, you're dealing with 300 individual business owners.
Yes.
So, but I must say the OCGSO they were very, very helpful and very willing to assist us.
Darn it, you've just burst my bubble, because I went hell for leather with the CEO, Tara will tell you, just to, put a cracker up. Because frankly, I think it's to their advantage as much as it is to our members' advantage to be able to say, here is a group of retail paint and hardware stores. Anyway, we've broken the back of that, as you've said, and they are coming to the party. So that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Aggie, we'll get on to you. I know what I wanted to say to you, Aggie, and that is this. You have to register your footprint. So you register at the footprint. You don't register at the group level. So if you've got, for argument's sake, 15 stores, you register each store individually. And so we'll ask you then just to complete a form for each store. It's a one-page document. It's really not that bad. We'll get the document to you. We'll tell you what supporting documentation we need back from you, and we'll process it through SAPMA. So thank you for that question, Aggie. All right. Okay. So I've already mentioned the National Bargaining Council. Oh, no, sorry, I haven't. I've already mentioned BUSA and NEDLAC in point number 8, but I want to come back to point number 7. But just before I come back to point number 7, the National Bargaining Council, let me go back to BUSA and NEDLAC and say this. Depending on the focus of your business, if you're a buying group, then you definitely have to be in some of the subcommittees at BUSA, because tenders, tariffs, taxes are discussed there and directly impact either part goods or finished good and finished product in a variety of ways, including the importing into South Africa and the exporting from South Africa. So it's very, very important that you focus on the opportunity of BUSA, Business Unity South Africa, whether you're inward bound, your product's inward bound and you're importing and distributing, whether you're buying locally and distributing as a buying group, or in fact, whether you are sourcing, manufacturing and exporting as well, but within the retail terrain or the part finished good terrain. And there are multiple structures at the Business Unity South Africa where it's very useful to slot in as a member of those subcommittees. I can guarantee you that certainly the feedback we're getting from generally SAPMA members who participate in BUSA, I can guarantee you that it is not a waste of time to participate in those activities as long as you find your place. If you feel that you're in an environment, on a committee where everything is washing over you and nothing is resonating with you, then you're obviously on the wrong committee or in the wrong place. And we will work with you and your members that have that kind of an interest. And I'm going to say that again. We'll work with you and your members that feel that they want to participate in the setting of policy, state policy, legislation and regulation, because it's going to impact on your businesses, be it by way of treasury, be it by way of customs and excise, be it by way of local government and what local government often do to you when they raid your businesses. And Jaco will tell you that we had a very weird situation recently, more than one of those situations among some of his members, where the Department of Labor marches into a store and says to the store, because you are mixing paint in your store, you are dealing with hazardous substances in your store, we literally are going to close you down. We're going to take action to close you down. Because they don't understand that that's not just a regulated process, but it's a permitted process, because the machinery and the equipment and the training of the mixologists, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of that fancy stuff going on. You will have heard that the Department of Employment and Labor are about to employ another 10,000, but that's for the election purposes, another 10,000 labor inspectors to blitz compliant businesses. And the biggest problem we have in the retail sector are the illegal, non-compliant businesses that are eating your breakfast and your members' breakfast. And Gary, I see you nodding a little bit there. So the reality is what we are doing is making sure that we put you at the table where that kind of stuff can at least be discussed and possible regulations be engaged upon with government. So as far as number 8 is concerned, BUSA and NEDLAC, I don't want to underplay the importance of it. I know you all run your own businesses. I know your members run their own businesses. But at some stage, we have to have people who are prepared to sit in those structures and say, we represent the largest collective of retail businesses in this country. And as such, we want to have our say. We want policy which reflects our working environment, our trading environment. Point number 7, I'm going to go back to point number 7 now. And point number 7 is critically important, colleagues. So 32 odd years ago, the National Bargaining Council for the chemical industry was created. At that stage, retail was actively involved in SAPMA. And so a new association is created 32 years ago called the Surface Coating Employer Association, specifically for the purpose of representing some SAPMA members that want to voluntarily subject themselves to the bargaining council, representing those members on the bargaining council. A constitution of SAPMA gets approved. That constitution of SAPMA includes suppliers, manufacturers, retailers and distributors, and contractors. So the National Bargaining Council gets structured around at least partially representing the interests of retailers. But retailers, on a voluntary basis, never join the National Bargaining Council, which is fine up until today, 28th of May, 2026, because the National Bargaining Council is a voluntary bargaining council between those trade unions that want to play and those businesses that voluntarily want to play. The problem we've got is that the Minister of Employment and Labor, there are 5 chambers in the National Bargaining Council. There are 4 chambers in the National Bargaining Council, apologies. 3 of those chambers, the Minister of Employment and Labor has already extended their voluntary agreements to cover non-parties. That means that for those chambers, petrochemical, for example, pharmaceutical, for example, glass, for example, those chambers no longer have a voluntary situation where they don't have to belong if they don't want to the bargaining council, where they don't have to pay a minimum wage of roughly about 10,500 Rand at the moment, going up to about 11,500 Rand in July, and where wages and conditions of employment are not very far ahead of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So, for example, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act say 15 days a year leave. the agreements range between 20 and 25 days a year leave in the bargaining council. I'm just using that as one condition of employment. So up until now, whether you're a manufacturer or a supplier or a retailer or a contractor that hasn't been a member of the bargaining council, not a problem. The problem is that the last remaining chamber of the bargaining council that is still voluntary is industrial chemical, which is where the Surface Coating Employer Association finds itself. And within the next 6 months to a year, that chamber is going to have its voluntary agreement, which, by the way, is currently being negotiated and will be implemented from the 1st of July for at least 1, if not 3 years. But to have that agreement extended to non-parties, we're about a year away from that scenario. So it's critically important that you understand the message I'm giving to you, colleagues, that you have to sensitize your retailers to the fact that whereas at the moment they don't have to belong to the National Bargaining Council for the chemical industry, because there isn't a bargaining council for retail, and because the National Bargaining Council for the chemical industry claim retail paint and hardware, the moment there's an extension, your retailers will be covered. And we need to be proactive now before there's an extension to make sure we negotiate properly for your members at the National Bargaining Council. We have, bless you, Gary. We have negotiated, for example, exemption application procedures, much better than they used to be. You can apply for an exemption to the Bargaining Council agreement because you can prove that having to suddenly raise your minimum wage to 10,500 Rand a month will cripple you financially, or for any other kind of reason. So we've negotiated a significant range of extension opportunities and procedures in your favor. We've also negotiated a small business 3-year phase-in program, which means that if you're doing less than 50 million Rand a year turnover, you can be classified as a small business. And as such, the Bargaining Council will allow you to phase up towards that minimum wage. Just remembering that in 3 years' time, that minimum wage will have increased 6% a year. But we want to make sure, I want to make sure, that you have a seat at the table in that Bargaining Council, even if to impress upon the Bargaining Council that an extension is unfair, given that at this moment in time, there's not a single retailer that is covered by that Bargaining Council. It's the industry that the Bargaining Council forgot about. Thank God, I suppose, in many instances. But they forgot about you guys. They forgot that they were responsible for you. Now they've woken up and said, oh, but hold on a moment, where are these retailers? And the answer is they're not going to become your voluntary members. And yes, an extension might apply to them, but we're going to fight an extension. And so I'm trying to, in bringing this up today, I'm wanting to sensitize you to the fact that there is a battle coming on behalf of your members. It's a worthwhile battle that will have a financial impact if we lose it. And we have to make sure that we moderate the impact of it on your members. We've spoken about it for a number of years now, at least the last 4 years, trying to conscientize our members to the fact that it's coming up. But today we're focusing on retailers and saying retailers, we need to be conscientizing retailers about this. We cannot get enough communication out there. We have to keep trying. We can never rest on our laurels in that particular regard. So, yes, Jaco, please.
I'm just wondering, where does FMCG and clothing retailers stand on this?
So here's the thing, Jaco.
Larger than hardware.
They're larger stores than hardware, but retail paint and hardware have more footprints. We have to realize that. In terms of the number of stores that belong to an association, all right? There are tens of thousands of retailers in all different domains out there, but they don't all belong to an association. Tara, I see your hand. I just wanted to say one more thing. One of the chambers within the National Bargaining Council is in fact FMCG, but that's not retail paint and hardware. It's general FMCG. Sorry, Tara, you wanted to say?
Sorry, I just want to confirm there, Yaku, are you referring to like your Woolies stores and that? If that is the case, then if I'm not mistaken, either FMCG has already extended their agreement. Am I not correct with the National Bargaining
FMCG
Council?
agreement's been extended, but if you take Woolies, for example, as one particular one, Truworths as another, they fall under the National Bargaining Council for the clothing and textile sector.
Okay, so it doesn't apply to them.
Doesn't apply. FMCG in that instance doesn't apply to them.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't referring to food retailers as FMCG.
So there is a National Bargaining Council for the food and beverage sector as well.
Okay.
You think of taking your guys over to food, Yako?
No, not at all. No, it's
Not
just
a bad idea.
Retail is a lot wider than paint and hardware.
No, I know. That's our problem. Paint and hardware is tied to the coattails of SAPMA because it's part of the value chain. And in the Surface Coating Employer Association, it's in a constitution that was created 32 years ago. Aggie, were you, and please, I'm not saying you're old, but were you around, Aggie, at that time?
When at the beginning? No,
when the Surface Coating Employer Association constitution was put together?
No, I know that when I joined, Derek wanted to change a few things in the constitution, and then they changed certain things to include the hardware side, and because it was, there was a bit of a debate whether they form part of the SAPMA or whether they didn't form part of SAPMA. But then after that, we put the separate body for the retailers.
Okay. I do want to say this, colleagues. So SARPHA, the existence now of the South African Retail Paint and Hardware Association, takes retail off of the SAPMA grid and puts it into the coatings umbrella, still administered by SAPMA, but out of paint manufacturing, paint supply, and paint contracting, and gives it a standalone identity. Little bit like waterproofing does for contractors. Little bit like the Surface Coating Employer Association does for purposes of dispute resolution. So we've got the registered association now. We have a collective number of retailers, roughly about 300 to 400 retailers that we have within our identity of SAPMA that now form part of the South African Retail Paint and Hardware Association. We have the advantage of utilizing the Surface Coating Employer Association for purposes of representation of our members in dispute resolution. So every member company with SAPMA is an associate member of the Surface Coating Employer Association for purposes of being allowed to be represented in conciliation and arbitration activities, either at the National Bargaining Council or at the CCMA. I don't have to tell you that your staff sometimes don't know that they have to go to the Bargaining Council, so they go to the CCMA and drag you to the CCMA. Up until now, unless you're a member of an employer association, which is registered with the Department of Labor for purposes of dispute resolution, you've not had an opportunity to actually have someone come into the mediation session with you or into the arbitration session with you because of something called Rule 25. Now that every one of our members is an associate member of the Surface Coating Employer Association, we've automatically given you that right to be represented in mediations and in arbitrations, either at a bargaining council level or at the CCMA. And that is a message we're wanting to get out to your members very clearly. You are no longer alone. Sorry, Aggie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. At that time, we decided to split the retailers and the painters, the applicators. I don't know if that's still being done.
Yes.
The applicators.
Absolutely. So we have 4 chambers in SAPMA. we've got the suppliers, we've got the manufacturers, we've got the retailers, and then we've got the contractors, the applicators. And within contractors, we've got general contractors, but we've also got a specific association called WITASA, the Waterproofing Trade Association of South Africa, which, by the way, is also a Office for the Consumer Goods and Service Ombud partner, representing contractors. So it's the split is very much there between retailers and between contractors.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Right, guys. Any questions before I carry on? Gary?
All good.
Jaco, you okay there?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so moving on now. And certainly I became very much sensitized in Jaco's membership about one of the most dangerous, the most pressing issues in retail, which is really about these illegal, non-compliant, very often illegal immigrants, not registered businesses that are trading in competition with existing compliant businesses, registered businesses, etc., etc. We know that's a big problem. And our strategy is to use Business Unity South Africa to pressure NEDLAC to have regulations that impact on local governments. So local governments have no choice but to clamp down on illegally trading businesses and businesses that are not accountable. Not accountable. One of the biggest problems we found is that local governments admittedly, openly say, the reason we are raiding your businesses, Aggie, almost monthly sometimes, is because you're there. You're not going anywhere. You're registered. You've got an address. You're a director. You're registered in CIPC. It's easy to track and trace you. We can't do that with illegal businesses. Firstly, because they won't allow us into their businesses. They threaten our inspectors' lives. So our inspectors won't go into those businesses. And more importantly, these guys sometimes move around and you never know who the owner of that business is. And so that is what we're up against as formal legal retail paint and hardware in South Africa, is that the illegal industry and sector is eating your breakfast, is eating your members' breakfast. Now, there are some buying groups that are actually trading on that. Some buying groups that are actually supplying those illegal businesses with product, very often product which is in competition to you, very often the same product that is being supplied to you, not very often, sometimes, the same product that is being supplied to you as a compliant business. And sometimes what's happening is a manufacturer will take a product that's not lead compliant, push it out through the informal sector, and push its compliance sector at a price premium into your member companies. And Gary, I'm thinking you guys in particular, when I say, I'm saying as a group of companies rather than just one business. And that is a problem. It is a big problem. Now, with the African Free Trade Agreement, it's even worse. Because with the African Free Trade Agreement, we've institutionalized the dumping of product from other African countries and from other international players through those African countries to come into South Africa by 2029, tariff-free. So fully assembled product, finished product, being dumped into South Africa at zero rated import tariff that you're having to compete with. And I'm going to say, sometimes recognized by ITEC as quality competitive with what you guys are selling in your stores. But for whatever reason, dumping into Africa because it's not compliant with European regulations, etc. So these are real problems that threaten your margins and threaten your bottom lines. And Jaco, I want to thank you for sensitizing and waking us up to just how dramatic this problem really is. Some of us operate in a bubble. Aggie, I'm going to use you as an example. Your bubble is you have a direct link between the manufacturer and the stores. So that's your bubble. And you can control your margins in the stores. You can control your price structure in the stores to some extent. Whereas others have an entire range of product from a variety of suppliers and have a lot more difficulty in controlling things like margins and trading criteria. And so we are a sophisticated sector. Retail, paint and hardware is a sophisticated sector. That means we need our own identity. And that's why the South African Retail Paint and Hardware Association was created, to give us that identity. And thank God we have SAPMA to facilitate that SARPHA comes into existence and its back office is maintained through the SAPMA office as part of the Confederation activities. Any questions? I just want to very quickly take you through the Constitution, colleagues. I realize we've got 15 minutes left, but any questions about what I've said so far? Okay.
I think, Ivor,
yes, Gary.
It's going to be a process. Like Micah have stronger structures. Organizations like ours have a whole lot of independent stores. Some operate in rural markets, some operate in the urban areas. So you've got regional dynamics, you've got cultural dynamics, and so it's not just something our group can onboard immediately. You did speak about phasing in the process. We also belong to a group like EST, who are extremely difficult to onboard.
Yes, Louis is not coming on board. I can tell you this now.
I know. I've been talking to him for a long time about it. See, we're a lot more structured than they are. We're very, very similar to Micah. And I mean, I could quite comfortably get at least 60 or 70% of our stores on board, where you're going to have a couple of stores that are still reluctant. But I think it's when they see the benefits, and if they don't do it, what the implications are in the longer term, then, I'll get them on board. But it's not something you're going to be able to adopt immediately. I'm definitely on board. I definitely see the benefits. So I just hope that you understand that. And I think one of the other concerns is, and you mentioned it, is that that people don't get penalized for complying. Like you said, with Aggie stores, if you registered, etc., you've got guys knocking on your doors all the time, purely because you form part of the Constitution and you complying.
Yes.
How do we enforce this and ensure that those that do not comply, that operate in areas that have got products that are not lead-free, that are importing from overseas, that aren't paying import duty? How do we ensure that's where the focus is area to benefit the men?
So Gary, thank you for that question. I mean, that's a critical question. And the reality is this: two things. We've got relationships with local governments. So local governments are saying to us, if you tell us where these stores are, all we need is to know where the stores are. We will make sure we send inspectors out. We'll send health inspectors out. We'll send labor inspectors out. We'll send DTIC inspectors out. And we'll make sure we blitz those stores, like was done in Johannesburg in the food industry. You remember when the informal stores had that poison crisis and they were poisoning kids? The municipalities worked together, they clubbed together under the South African Local Government Authority. They went in, they blitzed those stores and made sure that they would all have to register, they would all have to have their health certificates, etc., etc. So we just need to give them the go-ahead by telling them where those stores are. And it's for that reason that Tara implemented the whistleblowers hotline, because we've got a whistleblowers hotline that says, we don't need to know what your name is, we don't need to know what your store is. Just tell us where the illegal store is, and we will go after that illegal store. And I just wanted to come back to a point that you made about it's a slow process, it's a relatively long process. That's fine. We're not in a rush. We've got nowhere to go here. So the point I'm trying to make is it takes as long as it takes, Gary. I know that I can most probably forestall the extension of the bargaining council extension of the agreements by a year, if not 2 years. So whereas the bargaining council is hoping by the end of 2027 to apply to all players in all industries covered by the Constitution, I know that I'll most probably, as an executive member of that bargaining council, most probably be able to buy us another year, if not another 2 years. And there are different ways of doing it, which gives us enough time to sensitize our members to the fact that the clock is now really ticking. So that's that. As far as local governments is concerned, and I've said this to Jaco as well, just tell us where these buggers are. Just give us an address. Just tell us where these buggers are, and we will do the rest. We will get into local government. We'll force local government to go after those stores. We'll give you a report back on what was done with those stores, which is critically important. I think what I also want you to do is just, be in a good relationship, be in a loving, good relationship with your suppliers. And what I mean by that is your suppliers must probably know better than you who's eating your breakfast. And so it is about data, it is about information gathering. It's about just completing spreadsheets if we send them out and say, just tell us where these buggers are. But the more we can have information on where the illegal, non-compliant businesses are, the more we can act in your own best interests. What was interesting. Yes.
That's the important point there, because it's not only the imported products that are coming in. Our own suppliers in this country are supplying those illegal operators.
Sure.
And Jaco will tell you they operate on very low margin. Their cost basis are very low, and hence the reason why they are very, very competitive.
Yeah.
But suppliers, that's a starting point. They shouldn't be permitted to supply these guys.
Aggie, as someone who's had this headache for decades now, previously, did this ever come up in SAPMA discussions between suppliers and retailers?
Not really. Some of the guys, sometimes we brought up the subject, but it wasn't really taken that seriously at the time. I think we were just trying to get members on board at that time in the early days.
There's something that's, and now I'm glad I'm sitting hundreds of miles away from you, Gary, but there's something that you have to be aware of as well. And that's a chap called Parks Tau. I'm sure you've all heard of Parks Tau. He's our Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. He introduced about 6 months ago a transformation bill. The purpose of the transformation bill is to put 200 billion rand into a kitty, 20 billion rand over a 10-year period, 20 billion rand a year into a kitty, and to spend 55 million rand a day with your tax money funding your competition, transforming every single sector he can lay his hands on. And retail is definitely in his sights. And that's why I need you, Gary, at BUSA, because when BUSA say, we've just got a proposed new piece of legislation that says only 100% black new entrants into the retail paint and hardware industry will have access to that 55 million rand a day as business startup capital to buy their stock, to market and to trade their stock in the commercial markets and in the consumer markets. That we're at the table, at that table on that piece of legislation, saying, no way, Jose, not with our tax money. And that's how dangerous it is. You've seen the legislation. Hopefully you saw our response to the legislation. Our responses are being ignored, by the way, as organized business. He's going ahead and implementing the legislation and regulations. And it's a fight we have on our hands to make sure that you and your businesses are not marginalized by new entrants. The problem we've got is that local, provincial, national government tenders are being geared completely to those 100% black-owned businesses now. Completely to them. So even 51% black-owned businesses are no longer going to be enough if Parks Tau has his way, but he's not going to have his way. But that's the threat that's looming at this moment in time. And I don't know, well, not I don't know. Our challenge is to consistently be sensitizing your member companies about this threat so that they're aware of it and they're actively engaging with us on strategies to deal with it, but not to put their heads under the sand. Critically important.
We're already facing those challenges. I mean, a good example is with the mining groups. I mean, if your manufacturer, it's not the retailer, if your manufacturer is not BE compliant, they will not allow you to supply that specific mine. However, your retailer can be compliant in all the items we've been discussing. But if your manufacturer is not BE compliant, you can't supply that mine. Yet somebody that may be BE compliant or a manufacturer that is BE compliant can supply that mine, yet the retailer does not comply with all the conditions or the regulatory points that we've raised.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And together, we need to have a repository of information and tackle the problem. One of the things I want to do, sorry, Aggie, just give me a second because I've got mad cow disease, so I forget what I say half the time. But one of the things we want to do, one of the things I want to do is create a LinkedIn page specifically for SARPHA, where every one of you guys becomes a thought leader on that LinkedIn page in your areas of domain. So for example, I will send you an article, Gary, that says, do you agree with this content? Add to it, edit it. First of all, it's going to count because you're an SEL, so it's going to count towards your CPD points. But finalize this article, I'll start off for you, so we can actually be posting it on LinkedIn so that your target market, who are not just your members, but other retailers and government, can sit up and say, whoa, hold on a moment, he's got a point here. And every one of you should be thought leaders in this regard. Whether it's Jaco on building the brand and making sure that 300 guys, disparate backgrounds, all want to play the same game. Or whether it's Aggie that says, from an internal supply chain point of view, how do you make product, how do you take product to market, and how do you keep it in market if you're a small to medium-sized business in a market that's dominated by the large guys? Every one of you has something to say, and it's going to be my job to suck that stuff out of you, sometimes put it into your mouths even, so that we put it out there in the marketplace and say we are retail, paint and hardware, we're loud and we're proud. Because that's what we have to do here. We've got no choice. It's fight or it's die. It's that simple. And I'm sorry to sound melodramatic. Sorry, Aggie, you wanted to say so.
The thing is, in the old days, before we got involved with SAPMA, I think Derek was originally with a smaller company with Promac at that stage. It just suddenly became, it was a closed shop. So they only took on members that fitted a certain criteria. And then Derek sort of decided, well, he was right actually, to open up when he became director there, he decided to open it up for all manufacturers so that we could get as many on board so that we could sort of control our industry. That was the main thing about SAPMA. Then he tried to do it on the retail side, and it was a bit slow, and so was applicators, also a bit slow. But there is a way of getting these things together that we all can work together. We don't have to share our business strategies and so on, but at least work together in controlling our industry.
Yes. Other industries work together. A bank teller is a bank teller is a bank teller. A mixologist is a mixologist is a mixologist. Bottom line is no one's interested in your formula, Zaggy. That's yours. That's your IP. That's not what we're sharing here.
Unfortunately, it's not a level playing field in this country, unfortunately, with what you just mentioned earlier.
Sorry, Jaco, you had a point to make, sir.
Yeah, I just want to add on to Aggie there. I mean, I think we've found a way, and with the rest of our opposition, that we coexist. I think the market's big enough for all the regulated groups to coexist. We've done so for many decades, and long may it continue. It's the unregulated sector that's a concern.
Yes.
So we're also very, very happy to work with our, call it opposition, but our fellow SAPMA members to control the industry in total, because it's worked well for us in the past, and like I said, we've always coexisted very well. Opposition and competition's healthy, and we all sort of keep each other sort of compliant and so on. So it's the unregulated industry that's a concern for us. And then another point I wanted to make with your comment on Parks Tower there. I mean, maybe I'm a half glass full type of guy, but my eyes sort of lit up at 55 million rand. There's a case to be made to oppose it, or if you can't beat them, join them.
Jaco, we've had this discussion.
Is there a way of taking advantage of that and saying, well, we've got the tried and tested business processes to make these independent business owners more successful. Let's work together to assess these guys, to set up their businesses, to supply them with a recognized brand, whether it's Warrior or whether it's Micah or whatever it may be. But we've got the tried and tested business processes. Let's apply the money in retail that works.
Sure. So there's a way now. We don't have to wait for that Parks Tower dream to become law. There's a way now. It's there. It's about creating a cadet program, for example, within the LRB group, and creating 100% black-owned businesses that you are entitled to be funded for already out of the Industrial Development Corporation, out of the Black Industrialist Fund, which is specifically then has been there for 20 years. There's 20 billion rand sitting just in that fund. And in the last 7 years, they've only used 5 billion rand. So the point is the money's there. That's not the issue. It's you saying, we've got 300 stores. We could most probably end up with 20 100% black-owned businesses that we can create. And then us just putting the plan together and taking it to the IDC and saying, give us a reason that you're not going to fund this. 100%, 100%. So SARPHA is that platform, that forum for you to talk to your competitors. All of you compliant, all of you saying you want to play the game to make sure that you preserve this space for registered and compliant and accountable businesses. That is the purpose of SARPHA. Guys, I just want to very, very quickly take you through the highlights of the Constitution. So SARPHA is established under SAPMA, but operates as a fully autonomous entity. It has an independent mandate. It's governed by an MOU with SAPMA, because SAPMA offers the back office support to SARPHA, and it has its own governance structures in place. It aims to be the unified voice of retail paint and hardware, fully compliant, no illegal trading, anti-dumping, anti-dumping, and product safety, standing for product safety. It engages with 4 key departments as far as I am concerned, at least in the beginning: local government, Department of Employment and Labor, Trade, Industry and Competition, and the Department of Health. Now, I think Department of Health is actually a critical priority, because the 17th of May has come and gone. So which means that any inspector can march into your store and say, I'm looking at a can of coat, at a tin of paint. I do not see a warning label about lead. I do not see a label saying that this product is under 90 parts per million. What's going on here? And we do not want that to be happening in your retail stores. Now, there are some manufacturers that have already indicated to the Department of Health that they're going to need more time and have applied for extensions and exemptions. But there are some manufacturers that haven't. And unfortunately, it is you guys that are at the coalface with the customer and the client. It's you guys that will be raided, and you guys that have to be vigilant about what you're looking at on a tin of paint. So Department of Health is a critical relationship. And I must say that Tara has built the most beautiful relationships with people in the Department of Health. They respect her. She works with an international organization called LEAP around lead in paint, not just to sensitize the market, our members, not just to sensitize them about the 17th of May deadline and last year's 17th of May deadline, that the actual paint had to have 90 parts per less than 90 parts per million of lead in it. But the Department of Health directors and director generals are a phone call away, and she has intervened on behalf of our members, both at the Department of Health and Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, on multiple occasions, whether it's getting stuff released from bondage in customs, whether it's getting them to move along, especially when there were problems at ports, or whether it's anything to do with health and safety. And so SAPMA have spent a lot of time and energy building up this network for you and for your members. I've mentioned BUSA, I've mentioned NEDLAC already, I'm not going to say it again. And the bottom line is, who are we saying? Who do we represent? We represent any retailer engaged in retail sale of paint, hardware, or related products. Currently, SAPMA members in good standing, or they meet criteria set by the management committee of SAPMA. Formally registered as a business entity, holding all required licenses and permits, who agree in writing to abide by our constitution and any code of conduct we adopt as SARPHA. And you'll see, I've sent you the constitution as well, but you'll see in the constitution there is a code of ethics and a code of conduct. Our members are either ordinary members or associate members or honorary members. We're very young to have honorary members, but they will eventually be honorary members. Aggie, I can see you sort of drifting into that category of being an honorary member eventually. But Chris is younger than you, isn't he?
You don't have to answer, Aggie. It's fine.
He's still a pipsqueak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, Chris is younger. Yeah. He's been around a long time.
All right, guys. So
Yeah.
I just want to talk about money for a moment, because you can say, hold on a moment, it costs money to run an association. Yes, it does. But you guys are already paying that money. That's the point. You already pay dues and fees on behalf of each of those retail footprints to SAPMA. And so what we're saying is this, and the management committee of SAPMA, and the Aggie still, but the management committee of SAPMA have agreed that 40% of those levies paid by retail will be levies which are there for the utilization of SARPHA priorities, retail paint and hardware priorities. No separate subscriptions payable directly to SARPHA or to SAPMA on behalf of SARPHA. But we want that 40% as a matter of discipline to be separately accounted for, with an annual budget approved by the SARPHA Board of Directors, independent audits by the auditors who are BOK, for example, and where members are in arrears, some kind of a discipline which implies suspension as well. Where a member is in arrears on levy obligations to SAPMA, may be suspended from SARPHA activities at the management committee's discretion. So that's included in our constitution. Composition. Well, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Right. So we're saying that the management committee or the leadership team in SARPHA should be the chair, the vice chairs of each regional retail cluster, and we want this to have a retail cluster flavor. We don't want it to be a national organization run in Johannesburg. We want there to be chairs and vice chair people in as many regions as we can have. And Gary, you're a case in point. There's Cape Town sitting at the table. We want to know that there's a chairperson and at least a vice chairperson in Cape Town. But the national management structure would be a chair, a vice chairperson who'd be the treasurer, and a vice chairperson who'd be there for marketing and advocacy. Obviously working with SAPMA, working with all of the tools in the Coating Confederation, including the professional body. Essentially, we want this to be a structure that is not bureaucratic. So it meets 3 times a year. It sets strategy. It adopts financials, including the budgets. And it is the constitutional authority of retail paint and hardware, the face that we give to BUSA, to NEDLAC, to the South African Local Government Association. Wherever it's necessary to have a face for retail paint and hardware, it is the board and the committee and the executive of SARPHA that is that face. Because you are retail paint and hardware. I'm not going to go into details about what a chairperson looks like, what a vice chairperson whose treasurer looks like, or a vice chairperson who's there for marketing and advocacy looks like. But a 3-person sort of management committee and an executive committee. When it comes to chair people, we've made allowance in the Constitution for someone who's elected by and from amongst the members, or alternatively a neutral appointment. A neutral appointment could be someone who's retired from the industry or about to retire from the industry, or a neutral appointment might be Edward Kieswetter. I'm being ridiculous, but someone like Edward Kieswetter who's no longer Commissioner of SARS and he's suddenly passionate about retail paint and hardware. I'm just using those as examples. A good constitution will always make allowance for someone who's a neutral chairperson as much as you can. It's not even worth discussing at this moment in time. We're quite far away from that point. SAPMA provides the resources and acts as a secretariat, both to the executive and the management committee. And that includes meeting administration, records and minutes, the register of membership, communication. It's governed by an MOU between SAPMA and SARPHA. And it provides the administrative, the logistical, and the operational resources necessary for SARPHA to function effectively. So that's the Constitution. And like I say, we don't want it to be bureaucratic. We want it to be implementable. We want it to be a case that over time, the Constitution is our identity, but the people who are on that leadership team are the people who are our ambassadors. Any points about the Constitution? You should all have been exposed to constitutions before. I can guarantee you there's nothing funny in this Constitution. And like I say, I have distributed to everybody around the table. Okay. So what I'm proposing, and by the way, it's absolutely open for discussion, it's just to get the ball rolling, is a steering committee. Now, we have had a member of MANCO put up, a vice chairperson of MANCO, put up his hands and say, I would like to be involved with SARPHA on behalf of SAPMA's MANCO. I would like to be involved with SARPHA in helping to steer this activity with Tara, with Iva, and with whoever the chairperson of SARPHA is going to be, so that all SARPHA's activities are championed at SAPMA and also championed within the Confederation. And I think that that's a great place to start. So what we're looking at is someone who's prepared to put up his hands, hopefully in this group, and say, just the steering committee between now and the end of the year, I'm happy to act as interim chairperson of the structure. Is there such a person around the table? I guarantee you it. Sorry?
Jaco.
Jaco, are you still there?
I logged out.
Yeah. All right. So Jaco, you've been nominated and elected as the steering committee chairperson. Thank you very much for agreeing to perform in that role, sir.
I'm happy to be involved in sort of a vice chairperson role.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So I'm happy to be involved. I don't necessarily want to lead the committee.
All right. Tara, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I think maybe what we can do is suggest exactly what Yaki said, that he would be as vice, but maybe put it out to all the people that unfortunately couldn't make the meeting either, because maybe there would be interest from that side as well. So just in terms of compliance and fairness, I think that we can open it up to everyone and then make a formal decision from there if everyone is
Fantastic.
happy.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion. Thank you for that. All right, guys. We're 9 minutes over. I'm going to go 1 more minute over to say that our next scheduled meetings will be June, August, and November. Tara, yes, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, June would be this meeting, I would assume, because June is Monday. And then we've got the SAPMA AGM. So that's taking place in June. So maybe the next one, instead of it being August, would just be September, and then one later on in the year, if I could suggest that.
So I think we're going to need a formative meeting at the very latest, I would imagine, early July then. So we could say
Perfect.
July, September, and then maybe one for the end of the year. I'm less concerned with having many meetings, but just that we get the work done so we don't bleed into next year not having a fully functioning SARPHA.
That's fine. I think, again, we can just propose that when we send out the recording to the other members
Sure.
that are not present.
Sure.
And then I just want to make a comment before we close. I am aware that inspectors have been coming around to retail stores that you've already noted, Iva, with regards to the lead and paint regulation and labelling. And some have even threatened to detain stock. We are aware of the situation. We have brought it to the Department of Health's attention with regards to the inspectors doing this, because they don't have the authority to do it, because at the moment there aren't enough registered bodies or accredited bodies to do the testing for your CDCs. So there is a solution that is in place and will be communicated early next week. I'm just waiting for final numbers from LEAP. But where there will be a facility available that would be able to do some free lead testing for your CDCs. But as soon as I've got that information confirmed from the Department of Health and from LEAP early next week, I will communicate that to all SAPMA members. So just if you could just keep an eye on that, and if you've got any questions, you can let me know.
Tara, can I ask a question in that regard? And I'm asking a question of like Gary and Jaco and Aggie, the people around the table that have retail stores. Are your branch managers up to date on what it is these inspectors are going to be asking for, what their powers are, and what their responses should be to these inspectors? And I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question, guys.
No, they're not.
I was going to say, I wouldn't think that they are, because there aren't those fine and definite guidelines and outlines. I think inspectors are just trying their luck at this point. So I think it's something that SAPMA and LEAP can devise and say, if an inspector is coming into your store, these are the kind of questions that they should be asking or could be asking, and these are the kind of responses that you should have on hand. And also, when the inspectors do come in, what legally they're allowed to do and what legally they're not allowed to do, because they're not allowed to detain stock, because as government, they are not supporting and providing the proper testing facilities for members to be able to be fully compliant, even though the members are wanting to be compliant. So,
Tara, can I ask you this? What does the law say should happen in a retail store? Just the highlights.
The regulation.
Yeah, what does the regulation actually compel the retailer to do?
Well, the regulation is manufacturer based, so it's not retail based at all. But the onus is obviously, because the retailer is the low hanging fruit. So the inspector is going to go to the retailer and say the labeling isn't compliant. However, it's the manufacturer. The regulation is manufacturer based. It's a manufacturing regulation, and we've established that in the guideline document.
So what should the retailer be asking the manufacturer for?
So what the inspectors are actually asking for when they're coming into the stores, from what I've been told and what members have informed me, the inspectors are going into the stores and asking for the CDCs to support the fact that the paint is less than 90 parts per million and that it is compliant.
So what
they
is a
haven't been
CDC?
asking
What
for
is a
labeling.
CDC?
So it's the certificate of declaration that is in Annexure A of the regulation. But you need to have a test that accompanies that, or some sort of declaration to say that it is actually compliant. And those testing facilities are not available. So that's what we're trying to get to be made available, so that members have that freely available. But if an inspector does come into the store and asks for those CDCs, everybody is referring back to the manufacturer's website. So we are encouraging manufacturers to place those CDC documents, if they've got them, or any testing documents that they've got currently, to place those onto their website so that the inspectors go straight back to the website so they can see the CDCs for the relevant products that they're asking or questioning.
And then they want to see
a
label that's compliant as well, right?
Yeah, but I think the labeling deadline is still quite new. So the inspectors aren't that informed yet in terms of compliance, what needs to take place there. And as we've informed the Department of Health already, that there will be redundant stock that's still on the shelves, that's taking time to move. So I think that they will give a bit more of a leeway on the actual labeling side. But at the moment, they're testing that the compliance is less than 90 parts per million.
Okay.
So, and legally they're allowed to do that. But if anybody does come into the store, please just notify us, and also just tell your store managers that they need to then refer those inspectors and tell the inspectors to look on the actual manufacturer's website for those CDC documents, because we're telling manufacturers to put those documents onto their website so that it's open and freely available for those inspectors to check that.
May be useful to do a printout and keep it in store as well. Aggie, I see your hand is up, sir.
Just for your information, the CDC's compliance declaration certificate, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's the Annexure A document, Aggie, in the regulation.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, just a little bit on these inspectors. They came to our premises. We got 2 notifications from 2 separate people coming to do the same inspections for health and safety at our premises. The one was from the head office, and the other one was just a local person here. I responded to them and I said, which one of you are going to be appearing here at our premises? I never got a reply. Monday morning, this was before the weekend, Monday morning, the one arrived here, and she was as strict as anything. She looked for just about under every little chair and things for to find compliance, things that didn't comply. And then, so we had a list of things that we had to do. We then got onto it to fix everything up, but 2 days later, the other one arrived from head office. And she says, I don't know what this person's doing. I can't understand it. I've been around for a long time, but I don't think all those things are necessary. So just to let you know, they don't communicate with each other. I don't understand how they get 2 people, but she said, I can't understand why the one interferes with my job.
And there are 10,000 more of those people currently being deployed.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot more difficult in the future.
That's why we need to keep on top.
Sorry, Iva, Aggie, are you referring specifically to lead and paint, or is it general compliance within the organization as well?
General compliance, health and safety compliance. You are not lead in paint. I don't think we've had anything with lead and paint. No one's complained about that.
Because if there is an issue with that in terms of health and safety, it's Elise Lawrence at the Department of Employment and Labour. And we can very easily get her involved and say that the inspectors are going out and that they're not educated and that they're actually duplicating work and asking for unnecessary documentation. That if they're going to go into our members, they need to have a specific document or a checklist that they're going to be asking you for, so that you know that you can be compliant and that you are compliant, to not waste their time and our time. So if it is something that keeps coming up, please can you just bring it to my attention, and I'll get Elise Lawrence involved with that as well.
I think it would be very nice of them to give us some documentation of what they're looking for.
I'll speak to Elise Lawrence and then I'll come back to you and give you, I'll give everybody some feedback on that as well.
Not that they were abrasive in any way.
No.
They were quite sweet, if I can use that term. But they did look for things. So it was a good thing for us as well. It was a bit of a wake up for us to make sure that we had all our stuff in place.
I really want to scare you now, just for a second.
You don't have time to scare.
The new Labour Law Amendment Act, which is about to be gazetted and published, says this, that if you have a trade union in your business, the trade union now joins that inspector as a co-inspector. So the staff can point out to the trade union what they think is wrong from a labor relations perspective or a compliance perspective, and the trade unionist becomes a deputized inspector in terms of the new Labour Law Amendment Act. And so we want to know the moment something like that hits your stores, please. Critically important. All right, colleagues, as we've been told by Tara, we've run out of time. I really want to thank you for this. I hope you found use in this discussion. Jaco, thank you so much for volunteering. We will obviously put the call out for other nominations as well from the other people in the group that were invited. And we will try and formularize that management committee as quickly as possible as a steering committee to get started with the work that we want to formally do in SARPHA. So thank you all for your time, and I apologize for going slightly over.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.